Well, hi everyone, and a warm welcome to you. I use the word warm very loosely because when I got up this morning there was a good coating of frost everywhere, and we've already seen a couple of light snow flurries today, so I'm not looking forward to this job very much. Before we get started, I want to say a really big thank you to the patrons of the channel that have contributed a small amount of money each month to help us keep it going, and some of that money has been invested in my new toy, which is a ramp. And I've bought that purely so we can start doing some of the videos underneath the car. Now, of course, this channel is for the man at home, or home mechanic I should say, who would normally not have access to this sort of ramp. And all of the jobs that I'm going to show you how to do can normally be done without a ramp. It's just going to make the job a lot easier, and certainly as far as filming goes, it's going to go from the impossible to the possible. So this is the first time I've used it on a job for the video channel, so hopefully this is all going to be good today. Now, things are slightly different today. Ordinarily you would only ever see me working on my own cars, but today a friend of mine from the forum has agreed to let us do the job on his car. He is aware that I'm not a professional mechanic, but all the same he's going to trust me to do the job on his car, which ties in really well, because today's video is a replacement of the rear differential, which is fitted to the four-wheel drive vehicles, or all-wheel drive vehicles depending on how you term it. And it just so happens his car has a quite seriously bad differential on it, so I'm going to change that out for him today. What else have we got to go? Oh yeah, rear differential. So this is the rear differential on the car, and it's located in the center at the back of the car, just here, in the rather awkward place to get out. And it can be made an awful lot more awkward depending on which exhaust you got, especially if you've got an aftermarket exhaust. But we'll do our best today to get that out and show you how to do it. Now, that I know of, there's 3 different models of differential fitted to these cars. There may well be more, but I've only come across 3. One type in particular does not have this pump fitted to the top, but the process for removing the differential is exactly the same, minus this pump fitted on the top. So yeah, the process is the same. We're going to get on with the job in just a second. First of all, I'm going to get this off the bench. We'll have a look at the tools you're going to be needing, and then we'll move on with the process. So as you can see on the bench here, we've got quite a large selection of tools. Now, it may well be that you won't need all of these tools, or we might need to add a couple of extra tools. The reason I've given quite a wide selection is because there's going to be certain places, based on which type of exhaust you have fitted, that you will need to use a different spanner to get to. Perhaps a gooseneck spanner or a swivel head spanner. And I've already had a quick look at this car this morning, and the tools that I'm going to be using on this car are different to the car that I did the same job on the other day. So what we're going to be needing, possibly, on the gooseneck spanners, we're going to need a 12, 14, 17 and 19, maybe. Then if you have access to them, some really nice long spanners, again 17, 19, 12 and 14 could be really useful for some of those hard to get at bolts, or ones that might be really tight. It'll just give you that extra little bit of torque. Then in the regular spanners, I've got a couple of extra goosenecks here, still the same sizes. Regular spanners are 17mm, and you're going to need a 12mm, but what I've had to do with this one is, because I didn't have one that was narrow enough, I've ground down the head slightly to make it narrow. There's one place where it will only allow access using a very narrow spanner. Now fortunately, spanners these days are really cheap, so if you don't have one with a neck that's quite narrow, then you can always just buy a spare one and grind it down just for this job. Swivel head spanners, again 12, 14 and 17. Any of those could be useful for this job. On the wrenches, we've got 14 and 12mm on a 3/8 drive. On a 1/2 inch drive, along with a couple of extensions, we've got 10, 14, 17 and 24. We have a breaker bar. No, it's not a breaker bar, a pry bar. The length isn't relevant. You'll see what it's for as we go along. Then we've got a breaker bar, a wire brush, a hammer or mallet, and something to put all your nuts and bolts in. Then finally, a couple of extra little bits and pieces you might need. Some penetrating fluid, the brand is irrelevant. Some regular grease. You're going to need something to mark a spot. So I'm using Tipex, any sort of marker will do. Tipex is handy, it's nice and easy to use. It's nice and bright white, does the job, but you can use whatever you want that will allow you to mark certain key points. And some RTV sealant. If you have the differential with a pump on top, you're going to need some RTV for that. And finally, a pile of rags. Plenty of rags you're going to need. And one more thing I've just remembered, may well come in handy, is a ratchet strap. Doesn't necessarily have to be the ratchet type, just a strap that you can put round to hold something in place while you work on the other end. So that's about it for tools. Hopefully that's everything we're going to need for today's job. Before we get started on the job, you're going to need to remove your both rear wheels. I'm not going to cover them in the video. I'm sure that you know how to remove a rear wheel. Jack your car up. If you're not jacking it up because you don't have a ramp like this, get it up as high as you can on some axle stands. The higher you can get it, the easier this job is going to be. We've got very limited working space under there, so the more you can create, the easier the job's going to be for you. Now let's get on with the job. Now before we start on this job, I just wanted to take the opportunity to tell you why we're changing the differential on this car. Now this particular car's had a number of problems with rumbling noises, vibration, poor gear changing, a whole range of different things to do with the drivetrain. And quite often it's not always possible to simply say it's the gearbox, it's a wobbly wheel, it's bad balancing, tracking, whatever. In this particular case, we know for a fact this differential's got a problem. And so we're going to show how to look for this problem on this type of car. Well, in fact, I believe it'll be the same for any car, just so you can check it out on your car if you've got any unexplained booming, vibration, rumbling noises. It just eliminates one thing out of the process. So in order to test this particular differential for this problem, we've removed the wheels, we've taken it out of gear, and we've applied the parking brake. Some of you also know this as the emergency brake, or what else do you call it? The handbrake. Yes, of course, here in the UK we call it the handbrake, because 99.9% of our cars, this brake is operated by a hand lever. So once you've applied the parking brake and taken it out of gear, jack your car up, locate your prop shaft or drive shaft and turn it fully clockwise. Once you've turned it to the point where it locks, you then need something to mark a point. And what you're going to do is you're going to mark a dot on here and a dot on here. Now on a good differential, when we now turn this clockwise, those spots should not move more than 5 millimeters. Or clockwise, yes, because we did anti-clockwise. And as you can see, this one is closer to 10 millimeters, even a bit more. So now there's an awful lot of play in there, and every time you change gear, there is a clunking noise, which is really annoying. It also creates problems with gear change itself. It creates vibration, it creates a booming noise, and a whole range of other things. So this is one to look for if you're getting any of those symptoms. We'll go through some of the other possible problems as we go along with this video series. But this is the reason we're changing this differential today. Let's get on with it. At this point, I've now taken off the handbrake, the parking brake or emergency brake. This will now allow us to turn the wheels, and that in turn will allow us to get to the bolts. We need to remove these shafts here, one on each side, and the process for each one is exactly the same. I've chosen to use 2 gooseneck spanners. Before you start the job, get yourself a blower or a wire brush or something in order to remove as much muck as possible from the differential and the shafts, because we're going to be exposing internal parts of the differential and you don't want muck falling into there. It'll make problems even worse. So let's start with a half shafts, 2 14mm spanners. It's a bit of a tight location, but you can get in there. Always work on the nut first. If you try to turn the bolt before undoing the nut, you'll find it much harder. So lock the bolt and turn the nut. Now these have been heavily caked in all sorts of muck, so the process is going to be a bit slow and we'll probably cut the video. There's no point in me showing every single bolt. Now, unfortunately, we can't get a socket piece in there because this rubber boot is in the way, so we have to do it with spanners. Now, I'm just thinking maybe we could do it if I go from the bottom with a wrench. We might get in there and do this a bit quicker. Let's just experiment with that. I'm going to get an extension in a second and try that. I'll just finish off this one. As I've said before, I'm not a professional mechanic. I don't do these jobs every single day. And sometimes I have to do things as I go along. So we've got a nut, we've got a washer, and then we've got a bolt at the top. I'm just going to get an extension for the wrench and see if we can make the job a bit quicker using that. So I went and got an extension for the 3/8 wrench, and this is a bit of a learning curve for me that I'm just passing on to you. I've tried to get that on there at a better angle, and as you can see, the wrench still doesn't quite go on at a nice straight line, and you should never work your tools at an angle, because all that's going to do is wear the top of the nut away and damage your tools. So I'm going to stick with the 2 spanners that I originally planned to use, the 2 gooseneck spanners. We can bring this now by using a spanner. We can take that bolt up to the top because the parking brake is off, get our 2 spanners back on here, and again nut first, and then we can work the nut and the bolt together. We're going to cut the video now because all I'm going to do is that same process of rotating the drive shaft and undoing all 4 nuts and bolts, and then we'll come back to you. With all 4 bolts now removed from the shaft, we can take this shaft out. Now it's worth noting that the differential itself has oil in it, but the oil is below the level of the shaft, assuming the person who filled the oil put in the right amount. So this means we can remove the shaft without the risk of any oil going into the coming out of the differential. To separate the 2, this particular one's got almost fused onto the side here, so we're just going to separate the join. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I do apologise, I try to remember everything. Mark where your shaft was connected in relation to the hub. Wow. This way everything that's been balanced up at the factory will go back with the same balancing. And I'm hoping I can separate these because this is well and truly welded on. Someone has sprayed some sort of underbody sealer onto everything and it does not want to separate.
Is there no hub nut like there is on the front?
I don't know what you mean. This should now come apart. And it's purely stuck with all the muck that I've sprayed it with. There we go. I knew that would happen. Right. Now we need to get the other end out of the differential. Now for this you'll need your pry bar, and you're going to get between the shaft at the top here and the differential. Try not to catch your seals as you go. It should pop out quite easily.
Try not to hit me, please.
Normally it would pop out quite easily, but not this one. Turn it around. I've got a funny feeling this is not going to be one of my favourite cars. Ordinarily these come out so easily, it's hard to see how they stayed in the first place, but not this one. There we go. So you see now it's separating. We'll find out now if someone put the right amount of oil in. Damn, it's fused in there. There we go. And when you lift it out, be careful not to catch your dust seal and oil seal. Spotted another problem with this that we'll deal with before we put it back together. So that's the first one. Now we're on to the other side of the car. Oh, one other thing, before you put it down, wrap some rag or something around there to stop any muck getting on the splines, because when you put this back in, you don't want that muck inside your new differential. I'm just going to put that there for now. And of course, that pile of rags that I told you that you're going to need, you're going to need them for a reason. You're going to roll that up and you're going to put it into the hole the best you can to stop any muck getting in while it's exposed. Now we're on to the other side. And on the other side, it's the exact same mirror image. Drive shaft, 4 bolts, and we're going to undo them in exactly the same way. I'll get on with that. I don't think there's any point in showing you what I've already shown you. You know how to do it now. Well, in typical British weather style, it's snowing again. Not adding to the fun of this job, but we're going to plug on for as long as possible. So I've now undone the 4 bolts on this side, the drive shaft on this side, and we're going to get it out from the differential, the same as the other one. Find somewhere away from your seals to get a pry bar in there. And pry it out. And with this one we're going to have a problem because the exhaust is in the way.
Down a little to go in.
Damn aftermarket exhaust, eh? I have no idea where we're going to get that through. I really don't want to have to take the exhaust off. We might be able to just about do it.
Oh.
There we go. But we've not got a gap to get up through there.
Oh, you're stuck on a brake cable.
Yeah. Oh, what a nightmare. Why couldn't it be a nice sunny day?
That'd be too easy, you know that.
Just a little more space. Ordinarily we'd come up through here, but this is not going to give us the space that we need. Hold on, let's give us a bit more. Is that enough?
You might be lucky.
Hey! Come on, there we go. Same as before, piece of rag around the end to protect it, and one inside your holes. Remove any muck so it doesn't drop in, and we'll just poke that in there. Okay, now we're on to the main drive shaft or prop shaft. For this one, you're going to need that 12mm spanner that I mentioned with a very thin head on it. That's because we've got limited gap in here. Depending on your make or drive shaft, actually this one has more gap than the one I did yesterday, so you might get away with a standard one. So there's that, and then on the other side, 14mm to undo these. Start with your nut first, don't try and turn the head first.
Hey.
Once you've loosened off your nut, the rest will come quite easily. Now, as with the other drive shafts, you need to make a mark if you're putting back the same differential. Now with this one, we're actually swapping the differential, so the marks will be absolutely irrelevant. And when it comes to putting this back together, I'll show you how you're going to identify which way round it needs to go. So 4 bolts, you do 1 bolt, turn your drive shaft for the next bolt, and continue all the way round. As before, we'll save some video time. 1 bolt's the same as the other 3. So we'll cut the video while I undo the rest of these bolts. With all 4 bolts now removed, we're just going to remove or lower the drive shaft from the differential. As before, little tap, and that will come free. Now, some people like to tie this up. I don't really see the point. There's plenty of resistance there to support it. So we're just going to let that hang there. And now we'll move on to the next bit. Just before I do that, I'm just going to go inside for a quick warm up because it's still snowing and I'm freezing. From this point of the process, different people are going to have different ideas on how to do things, and things will also vary depending on what type of exhaust you've got. If you have an original exhaust, you may choose to just pull it to one side. There may be enough gap if you've got the other type of diff, or you may choose to just take the back section of exhaust off. On this particular car, it has an aftermarket exhaust, and for some reason it's been welded as one single piece of exhaust all the way from the back of the car up to the engine manifold. That's an awful lot of work to take it off and requires a number of people to help with the handling. And we don't have a number of people, and I don't want to add all the extra time and risk of bolts snapping and all the extra work. So I'm going to try a different method that I've never had to try before. What I'm going to do is use a ratchet strap. We only need about another inch of clearance. So I'm going to put a ratchet strap around the side of the exhaust here, around the rear strut, through our ratchet system, and I'm going to see if I can ratchet the inch that we need. The exhaust is on rubber bushes, so it should allow enough stretch just to bring that over the inch that we need. And I think that's just enough to clear. So for next point, we're going to loosen. There's 1 bolt here and 1 bolt on this side. I'm going to just loosen them to allow us to disconnect the back and lower the back slightly. So we get a spanner in there. I'd like to put a wrench in, but the wrench does not allow, there's not enough space to get a wrench in. So we'll loosen the nut first. Once the nut is loose, we can get a spanner on this side, hopefully.
Out of curiosity, why are you undoing that bolt rather than the 3 that are on the actual diff?
These three here,
Yes.
they're harder to get to. There's 3 of them, and it doesn't allow us to swivel the differential down. I do not want to remove it at this point, and the reason will become clear shortly. Okay, that's loose enough. Same on this side. This one's got even less space. Okay, those are loose enough now to do what we need to do. You could have taken the nuts off completely while you're there, but I'm going to come back to them. Now we go to the other end of the differential, and for this you're probably going to need your breaker bar and a 1/2 inch 17mm socket piece. And we're going to get on the 3 bolts at the end here. Oh, that's one. Just loosen them and then I'll use a normal wrench. That's 2. And that's jammed. That's 3. Now we can go on to a normal wrench with a short extension. Now the reason I'm doing it this way is because on the top of the differential, if you recall, we've got a pump, and rather than disconnect the hydraulic lines and have oil leaking everywhere and have to then recharge the system, I'm going to remove the pump from the top of the differential and then reconnect it straight into the next one without removing any of the lines, thus saving a lot of work, oil, mess and time. And the reason I leave it at this end still connected is because it gives us a nice hinge system to lower one end without having to support the entire weight of the differential.
When you pull this one out, is it going to drop?
No, it's not going to drop because it is supported. It may drop a millimetre or 2, but it won't drop all the way. Just take the strain a little bit and we can undo that by hand now. Yeah, that's a long one.
Did you do it by hand?
Not quite. So that's the 3rd one. Now from this point we have a certain amount of movement actually. As always, it's all stuck here. Okay, you see now the differential is lowering a little bit. And that gives us all the space we need to undo the nut at the top, or the bolt at the top. So we're going to cut the video, camera's coming around the other side, and we'll look at disconnecting the pump. Next part of the process, we're going to separate the pump at the top from the differential. To do that, you need a 14mm spanner, ideally with a swivel head, and ideally a ratchet spanner, because you're getting into a really tight spot up the top there. Now I've actually marked the bolt with a white dot, purely so you know where it is in reference to the differential. You probably won't be able to see me do the job because my hand's going to be in the way. But you can definitely get in there and undo that bolt. Now make sure before we take the pump out that you've tried your hardest to clean as much muck away from the area as possible, because you don't want muck dropping into the diff. Not unless you're stripping it down to rebuild anyway. Okay, that's that bolt out. Now we're going to separate the pump from the differential. Sometimes they'll just work out by hand, sometimes you have to lever them. And this one's fused in, so we're just going to get a pry bar under there and attempt to lever that out. Sorry, I've got to get my head in there. It does have a rubber seal that often makes it a bit tight, but I can see from here that it is starting to separate, do a bit on each side. Okay, that's coming up quite nicely now. Okay, maybe I spoke too soon. It was coming up quite nice. I can see a lot of corrosion around there, so it's making things go a bit tight. I'll try again from this side. Did that pop out? Yes, okay, that's out now. Right, so finally, the differential is now separated. We should be able to lower it all the way down. I am cautious if there is still oil in there. And also if you've got some help, it's worth having some help at this point. One to support the differential and one to support the pump to make sure it doesn't drag down with the diff. I'm going to try and do this on my own.
If you want a hand, let me know.
No, I'm fine so far. It's coming nice and slowly so far. Now the differential is very, very heavy, probably 60 pounds. So be ready to catch it should yours decide to drop quickly. Just take it nice and slow.
Remember, you've got the front bolts in still.
Yep, I'm just trying to hinge it down a bit, make sure everything's clear, and then we'll do the front ones.
Off on this side, we'll get caught on the exhaust and pulled out.
Sorry, the what wheel?
Cloth that you put in for the
Okay, yeah, that should move. That should move. Just want to clear this pump before I go any further. Now on the end of the pump is a little plastic gear wheel. Watch you don't damage that. No, we're going to have to go down a little bit more, and there will be a point where it will want to drop, so be ready for it. I'm even tempted to put a strap around there just to support it. Seeing as I'm doing this job on my own, I don't want to risk having the thing drop on me. These straps can be really useful sometimes. Okay. Come on, down you come. Yeah, you might be right about that rag. That seems to be stopping us. Okay, that's the pump fully clear. I've tucked that up the top out the way, hoping it'll sit there. Yep. Now we're going to tackle those bolts on the front, the two that we loosened off, one on each side, and that should be the final thing holding this, just to stop it dropping on me. We'll do that strap up a bit more. Two 17mm spanners. Am I missing something here?
It's only being loud.
Oh, here we go. Or has that broken my spanner? I think we might have broken my spanner. Yeah, it looks like I did. Now once I've got the nut off the end of this bolt, I'm not going to pull the bolt out at this point. We're going to leave it until the nut is off the other side, and then we can drop the whole thing all in one go, rather than have it teeter on the edge. And I think you can appreciate that this job, if you're planning on doing this just using axle stands, is quite a serious job to do. Laying on your back, working all these bolts out is hard work. However, if you're in a climate that doesn't have the problems that we have in the UK with rust, you may not have so many problems. This is obviously going to take a few minutes. Saves me going to the gym, I guess. So I think we'll cut the video while I work this last one off, and then we'll come back. Right, snow's getting worse, we're getting colder. I've got the 2 nuts off from the 2 bolts. Now with a bit of help, we're going to try and wrestle these bolts out of the holes and lower the differential onto the floor. And I don't expect this to be easy. Can you lower that in just a little bit more? Will that come down?
Yeah,
that's it.
Watch out for the pump on the top. As long as it's not caught on anything, we'll be
Yeah,
fine.
that's fine, as long as it's free.
Smell transmission fluid.
It's leaking, is it?
I can smell.
Oh, smell it. Yeah, it shouldn't leak. Oh, come on. That's one. We need to go in a bit. There we go. Oh, come on. That's number 2. Okay, between us now, if you keep that level as you can, bring it down. You've got the back all the way to the ground. Okay, so there we go. Just watch that muck doesn't drop in there. Differential out. Someone's just bashed their head. And the snow, if you pan round. You see the things I do for you guys in the snow. We're still filming. That's a differential out. That's not the end of this video. What we're going to do now is swap some of the parts over from this one onto the new one, and then we'll show the refitting. Ouch, that's my head again. Where's that other? Ah, there we go. Just protect this as much as we can. Now, although this differential is very, very much at the end of its apparent life, we're actually going to do another video at a later date where we strip this down and show how to restore it, recalibrate it all, and then it'll be ready for use in another car. So wait for the snow to stop, we'll get the bench set up, and we'll show the refitting of the diff. After a real struggle of getting that thing out and all the hard work in the cold, all we need to do now is swap over these 2 brackets onto the new diff that we're using. Simple 17mm bolts, 2 on this side, 3 on this side. I'm not going to bother filming the whole lot because you'll know what a bolt looks like and how to undo it. So just simply unbolt them, bolt the 2 brackets onto the new diff, do them up nice and tight. And then one final thing that we may well film is we're going to remove the pump off of this one because we've still got the pump on the car from the old diff that we'll be connecting straight into there, safe disconnecting all the pipes. So let's get on with it. You're going to need a breaker bar, by the way. These are normally really, really tight. That's one. I believe I already loosened that one. Yep. And I should have brought, I did. We've now swapped over the parts from the other differential onto the new one, the 2 brackets. I did make a mistake. I did say there was 2 bolts on this side. There's actually a 3rd one tucked under the bottom here, still 17mm, so remember that one as well. Before we put this back in, something else I need to tell you. Because we're swapping over the differential, we didn't bother to put the markings for how the drive shaft fitted. If you look on the sides here, you'll see patterns. 2 sides are, oh, there we go, 2 sides are curved, 2 are square patterns where the old drive shaft was sitting. And you'll see the same patterns here, 2 curves, 2 squares. So you need to make sure you line up square for square, curve for curve, and you're going to be more or less correct when you go to put it in. What else do we need to mention? Because this is an aftermarket exhaust, it's much more in the way than a regular exhaust, so we're going to struggle to get this in a little bit, just as we did to get it out. But we've cranked it over as far as we can just to give us that little bit of extra space. And we've also calculated that if we put the bolt in on the exhaust side first, it will give us more manoeuvrability and hopefully make the job a little easier. Don't forget, you've got your pump up the top here. That's going to get in the way when we try to bring this up, but I can't put it in until this is up quite a way, so we're going to manoeuvre around that the best we can. Definitely a job for 2 people. This is extremely heavy and a lot of manoeuvring about to be done. We've kept the sling here. We're first of all going to try and get the differential into the sling, so if we need a bit of a respite, we can let the sling take the strain. So if you're ready, let's see what we can do with this. Are you able to get that in there? Is that in?
That looks good.
Okay, if you've got the back end. Just 1 second, I'll grab a bolt. Let's see if we can wrestle this thing in.
Other side first, you said?
Yeah, as far as the bolt goes, but we'll still need to get both in through the slots. Oh, don't lift the car too high.
It needs to go forward more. It needs to go up.
Oh, nearly there. There we go. Right, that's that one. Now one for the other side, which might be a bit harder until we've gone above the exhaust. So we'll leave it with just that one bolt just for now to take the strain. That enables us in to come around here. Now in a minute, can we tighten this up a bit more, give it a bit more? Watch your fingers. Okay, that gives you a bit of breathing space there. Now we've got to try and get this pump in. Now because it's a different differential and pump, the mating surfaces don't necessarily give a total watertight seal. So what we've got to do now is try and get the pump in, and we're going to put a very thin smear, and I must emphasize very thin smear of RTV sealant. It's only to block the tiniest of gaps between the 2 parts and stop any moisture getting in. Where are we? And the reason you don't want too much is because if you put too much, all that happens is it squelches through the gap into the differential, and there's no need for that to happen. It also makes the job look rather messy. So just run your finger around the edge there, so that when we put the pump back in, there won't be any gap. Are we leaking some oil? Okay, now we can bring this down. And get it into the hole there. We've now got to release this strap because it's in the way a bit.
Camera is just to your right of your head.
Okay, at this point, we should now be able to go a bit higher into there. And then that will take some more of the strain. Can we get that over and tighten it up?
You're going to struggle now.
Yeah.
Because the exhaust.
Got it?
Might just get.
Is that as tight as it'll go?
That's as tight as I can get that there.
Okay.
And you were saying about 2 people?
Yeah, you definitely need to.
It's just got up in there.
Right. I'm going to try and get that pump in a bit more. It's a bit of a swivel and jiggle motion. Now I'm not happy with that support for now, so we'll get another bolt on this side if we can to give us that bit of extra protection. I don't want this swinging down in my head. Can you take the weight mark and take it in that direction?
Yes.
Assuming the exhaust is out of the way.
Should be.
Bit more. No, will it not go any further?
No, I can't.
Leave it stuck on this back mounting plate. Up there.
Yes. Might have to go up.
Up and over sort of thing. There you
Okay.
go. See?
Yes. That's good.
Still need to go towards Mitch a bit. Nearly there.
That's it, yeah.
Touch more. There we go. All right, that'll give us a
Just
bit more
Not on.
security and manoeuvrability.
Does that help?
Okay, now I'm going to try and get back on that pump again.
Hold on.
I'll be a weight. Shall I be a weight?
That might be easier from the other side.
Looking good over here.
Okay, I think I left the bolt down the other end.
Yeah, you've got about 6 mil left.
Yep, the bolt will pull in the last little bit. I just got to go and get that bolt. I left it down the other end. Okay, I've grabbed the bolt. This is now a 2-pronged approach. The pump is still able to turn, so you need to get your bolt in the first hole. If you're lucky, the 2 line up, but if not, put one hand up one side and grab hold of the pump, and one hand on this side with the bolt, and swivel it until the bolt hole lines up. This is turning into another one of those nightmare jobs.
No one said it was easy.
Yeah, but it could be easier, couldn't it, surely? Could do with one of those nice
Full height amps.
dry state cars. Just can't seem to find the hole.
Watch your head.
Yeah. Oh, really? Come on.
You're on the cable. Got it. Looks like you've got to be close.
It does, doesn't it? Keeps feeling like I've got it and then it slips.
Stop.
I think that's it. Spanner.
Alright.
Yeah. Right. Now, one thing I would say, when you put this in, if it's not dead in line, it'll go in at an angle and you'll struggle to get the bolt in and you'll damage the O-ring. So make sure when you put it in, you wiggle it down so it goes in perfectly level and the bolt screws all the way down. So, whew, on to the next bit. Let's get this bolt fully in.
Just be careful of that dropping. Remember that the back is not supported.
Well, we could stick those bolts in now. So you've got the 3 big bolts now that came out the back. Lift it up, find a hole. That's one. Oh, struggling a bit today. That's 2. And that's 3. God, I'm glad to see that back up in there. That's been hard work, not helped by the cold.
And the snow.
And the snow. Could you just run and grab us the ratchet handle and 17mm socket? And the breaker bar for that matter, thank you. Whew. I need that, sorry. And that, and that. Oh, where did I put the extension? I have the extension as well.
One less head banging avoided.
I'm not going to do these up too tight on the first run because I want to make sure all the other bolts are in place first. So I'm just going to do them just so they're in position ready for tightening up. I don't remember these being 12 inches long when we took them out. Right, that's that one. Two.
Sounds like a very empty fuel tank.
Yeah. Right, on this end, I'll try and finish getting that bolt back in. Oh, beautiful, it's all lined up now. Then we've got our washers and nuts to go on there. Washer. One nut, your leg's dying.
Yep.
Yeah, mine too. God, I don't know how I ever would have done this without a ramper.
I suppose it would have been laid down rather than squishing
Yeah.
legs. So, in that respect, it might have been a little easier. That, or we need a full height ramp now. Yeah.
You know what I need? Someone else to do the job for me. Right, a couple of spanners, or do you need a quick break?
Go on.
You want a break?
Go on, get it done.
Get it done?
Get it done. What is it, 2 bolts?
Plus the ones at the back.
So yeah, 2 bolts. Oh, plus the ones at the back.
Yeah.
5 bolts.
5 bolts. And then we'll have a little break, I think.
Reintroduce some blood flow.
You're going to do these up nice and tight.
So nice your ratchet spanner gives in.
Yeah.
I wonder what the torque tolerance is on it. On your spanner.
God knows.
Use it as a torque meter at this rate.
You know, if there's any tool suppliers out there who have got faith in their tools and want to give us a bit of sponsorship by letting us use their tools, please feel free to get in touch. Most of the tools I'm using, most, not all, are run-of-the-mill tools from local hardware stores and stuff, and I wanted to use those because I appreciate most people who are doing these jobs at home will not have professional tools, and I want to show that these jobs can be done with run-of-the-mill tools. I think that's tight enough.
What are you going to say?
Now we've got these ones at the back, and I've put, here we go. So now we can do these 3 up nice and tight. I'm going to get the breaker bar on those.
Move the car.
There we go. Right, that's the main bolts done up. We're just going to take a quick break, play in the snow, and then we'll get back on the next bit. So we've had a couple of minutes to defrost, stretch the legs, get the old bones stretched out again. The snow's stopped, the sun's come out. Typical British weather, like they say, if you don't like weather, stay around for a few minutes, it'll change. Now we're on to the drive shaft or prop shaft. You remember I mentioned about the curve and the square lining up the markings. I've taken the time to just put a couple of Tip-X marks on here so I can clearly see what I'm doing. Now you notice on the end of the prop shaft here, one little bit in the middle sticks out slightly, and that will drop into the hole on the end of the differential. So we'll get those lined up your holes, push it into the hole. The bolt, I'll pull it in that final bit. Grab your bolts, they go through from the back here. How far out am I? There we go. Don't forget your split washer. And a nut on the end. Now I'm not going to tighten this up at this point. We're just going to Get just enough to pull that in a little bit. Let's try a different spanner. And we'll get all 4 in before we go round again and tighten them up. It's always the same process. Never try doing up the first bolt if there's more than one in any piece of equipment, because you may well end up pulling it out of alignment or stopping the holes lining up for the next bolt in line. So always get all of them in first and then go round a second time to tighten everything up. Three, one final one. Now we can go round for the finals. And again, because this is under a lot of torque, you're going to do everything up really tight. Now, Mitsubishi do mention in the manual that you should check all of the threads to make sure there is absolutely no oil or grease on the thread, because they will work loose if there is anything like that on the threads. Okay, that's the drive shaft done. On to the next bit. Now it's time for the half shafts. There's a couple of little things you need to know about these before you refit them. First of all, don't forget the marks that you put on there have to line up. Second thing, your mating surfaces, it's absolutely critical that they are completely clean, otherwise that won't go on true and it'll wobble and give vibration. Next one, your shafts on this end, make sure they're all clean and none of the splines are damaged. And then finally, according to the manual, we should put a smear of grease around the oil and dust seal just inside the differential. This is to help the shaft slide in easier and not do any damage. Whoops, hold on. Yeah. And not do any damage. You don't need lots of it, it's just a smear to help it go in. Now, if I recall, we had to wrestle with this one a little bit because the exhaust is in the way. When you go in, please be careful not to catch your rubber seals. We did manage to get this out somehow. We had to turn it, didn't we? And there was a certain angle it would go in. There we go. That's part way. Now for the last little bit, you may well need a rubber mallet, which I forgot. going to need to get a mallet to push in that last little bit where we've got the O-ring. So just give me a second. Okay, finally managed to wrestle this drive shaft in. The problem we had turned out to be the little split ring on the end. Now Mitsubishi recommend that you change these every single time, but I didn't actually have a spare one here to do this job. So I actually took it off, crimped it back up so it was a bit more closed, and then we managed to get the shaft in without any problem. So now we can get this all lined up, remembering the marks that you put on there. The bolt goes through from the wheel side, and then the nut and washer go onto this side. Now the snow continues after our little tiny sunny spell, and we're all freezing now and anxious to get this done. The sun's going down, which isn't helping. So to save a bit of video time, the process now is your 4 bolts back in, 4 washers, 4 nuts. Don't do any of them up tight until all of them are in place, and then do them up tight. And once again, a reminder, the manual says make sure there's no grease or oil on the threads of the bolts because they will work loose despite having the split washer. So we'll save some video time while I do all those up. First half shaft in. Now we wrestle with a second one. Same process as before. Little bit of grease around the seal just to make sure the shaft slides in well. Now I was going to be putting a new gaiter on this shaft because this one's split. Unfortunately, I've just discovered that I don't have a spare gaiter laying around, and I don't even have a spare shaft for this type of differential, so we're going to put this back on today, and then I'm sure we'll be seeing this car again to fit a new gaiter, new video another time, hopefully without the snow next time. So let's wrestle this thing in. Same as before, you're going to get that shaft in without touching the rubber seals, hopefully. At this end, you've got to line up the 2 marks, and we're going to have the same problem with the split clip, unless we're lucky. Sometimes you get lucky and they drop straight in.
Sometimes they don't.
Only sometimes. So I'm guessing this one will be a wrestle like the other side. I didn't clean that mating face. Come on, you know you want to go in. Go on.
Have you lined the lines up? That'd be the mistake.
Yeah, the splines are lined. You can feel it's locked in. It's just that split ring stopping it. I'll have to remember to get some new ones. There we go.
Hey.
Thought I was going to have to wrestle that as well. Right, where's a mark? That's on that bottom one. Let's grab some bolts. Bolt was from the outside going inwards. Split washer and a nut. Now I'm not going to spend film time again. You know what the next 3 bolts are like, exactly the same as the first one. So get your remaining 3 bolts in. Don't tighten any of them up until all of them are in, and then go round and tighten all of them up as tight as you can. not with a breaker bar, just by hand as tight as you can. Okay, we'll come back in a minute. Second half shaft on. This has been a long day. We're on the homeward stretch. Final thing, and probably the most important thing, is don't forget to top up your oil. Now this particular diff, I did empty out some of the oil before we fitted it in, so we're going to put in some fresh oil. The filler hole is this one here, and just in case you needed to know, the drain hole is this one at the bottom. Now the correct filling is to get your oil hose in there. It's not really the best design if you ask me. And you've got to squeeze the oil in. Now the filler point is when the oil starts to drip out of the hole. So all you're going to do is take it up to the height of the hole, and then that's the correct level. This takes a little bit of a while. It's a very thick oil and I'm squeezing it in from a bottle above. Hopefully it won't take too long, because I didn't completely empty it. I just took a little bit out so we didn't have any running out all over the place. It's a good idea to have a rag handy as well.
I've just moved one into place. There you go, there you go.
Right. Oh, sorry, did I get you?
Yep.
Okay, so we're up to level. It's just starting to drip. Put a nut back in. It's dripping on me as well. Do that up nice and tight. Remember, not too tight with this. You're going into an aluminum casing, so you don't want to cross thread it. That feels pretty good to me. And at last, end of the day. That's the job done. Thanks for bearing with me with this one. It's been a horrible, horrible cold day. We're all shivering, freezing, looking forward to a nice hot meal. That's how you change the diff. Remember, I'm not a professional mechanic. This is just how I do it, and it's how the book says as far as I can tell. So for this video, now complete, I hope it's of use to some of you, and thanks for watching. And a special thanks as always to the patrons. And if you've enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I've now got, I don't know, 80 or so videos online and new ones going up all the time. I'll do my best to do whatever videos I can for you. There is a forum that complements this channel. If you want to join the forum, you can ask questions on there, and you can also request a video. I do appreciate you doing it via the forum. I don't really get a chance to answer questions on the YouTube channel. That's not really what it's for. It's hard to keep track of messages on there. They all come at different times and different videos. So please join the forum if you want to ask any questions or if you want to request a video. So for now, thanks for watching. Appreciate your company, and I'll catch you on the next video.